I think that this argument is a sound argument for God's existence.
How about arguments that are personal, that you can't convince anybody else of, but that you feel? I know people have them because many people talk about it, but are those philosophically legitimate?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that my belief in the existence of God is ultimately not rooted in these arguments. These arguments provide confirmation or reinforcement for my belief that God exists. But my belief that God exists is rooted in my personal experience of God. He's a living reality in my life and has been ever since I became a Christian as a teenager. And I think that's perfectly defensible. We spoke a moment ago about our knowledge of the external world. There's no way to prove that the external world exists. There's no way to prove you're not a brain in a vat of chemicals wired up with electrodes to think that we're here in this room having this conversation. Similarly, there's no way to prove that the past is real, that everything wasn't created 5 minutes ago with built-in memory traces and appearances of age. These are what philosophers call properly basic beliefs. They lie at the foundations of our system of beliefs. Now, these beliefs aren't arbitrary. They're rooted in experience, my experience of seeing and feeling and smelling objects and remembering the past and so forth. So these beliefs are grounded in experience, but they're properly basic beliefs to my foundational system of beliefs. And I would say similarly, the belief that God exists is, for those who experience Him, a properly basic belief rooted in the experience of God Himself. And in the absence of some overwhelming defeater or objection to belief in God, the believer is perfectly rational to accept that God exists, just as we are perfectly rational to believe in the external world or the reality of the past.
Well, most people's internal feelings about things are acculturated because of society or family or experiences or psychological benefits or problems that people have had. How can you depend upon something that is so emotionally based to root your deepest belief?
Well, I think that an atheist, to carry this argument, would have to show that there's a particular psychological profile that religious people have. And that just has never been demonstrated throughout the world. There isn't any sort of particular psychological profile that religious believers exhibit. They come from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of belief systems, all sorts of emotional and cultural upbringing. And so I think it would be very hard for the unbeliever to try to show that this experience of God is spurious or non-veridical.
But what you're saying, though, demonstrates that all these different expressions of people's belief are vastly different kinds of gods and religions and systems and doctrines and all this mished together. But you're pointing to some core commonality among all these superficial differences that somehow proves an existence of God, yet the God that those are all related to are all different.
Well, no, I wasn't appealing to that. I was thinking of people who believe in a traditional theistic concept of God, that they don't exhibit any sort of psychological profile. Freud attempted to do this by saying that it's the projection of a sort of father figure on the heavens due to an Oedipal complex. And that's been, I think, completely evacuated of any plausibility. So I wasn't speaking of pantheistic concepts of God or other concepts of God. That's an entirely different question. What I meant was that believers in the traditional concept of a monotheistic God don't exhibit any commonality in terms of their psychological upbringing or culture or profile that would lead us to think that you can say this is non-veridical.
And you, as a real individual, will rely upon that more than all the other arguments from science or philosophy?
Yeah, I would. I think that the experience of God, for him who has it, is a self-authenticating experience. It's something that's so real that it overwhelms the defeaters which are brought against it.